Good morning, Keandre. How are you doing today?
Good morning. I am okay. Just completed the criminal law midterm exam, so
Okay. How did it go? How do you feel about it?
it wasn't bad. What I found is that when I got down to the last question, I was practically out of time. So it was just like select and answer and go.
Right.
It
Right.
was it wasn't bad.
Okay. So how about you guys? How about you, Vincia? How did you feel about the midterm?
Um, it was okay. Like I did satisfactory, but
Okay.
some questions had me like wary because they seem tricky. But it was good.
Good morning,
So
sir.
good morning. Good morning. We're just checking in, seeing how folks feel about the midterm. And I want to be clear, right? I'm not asking you guys how you think you did or what was on it, because I'm going to tell you a piece of advice that I was told my very first semester of law school by my contracts professor. Um, he said, if anybody comes up to you after an exam, after a law school exam, and says, "Oh, so what'd you put for number two? What'd you put for number six? What'd you put for number 25?" Your only response should be to just slap them. Just slap them. Do not answer that question. Because what they really want to do is they want to compare. And there is absolutely no purpose to be served by that. Okay? You've answered your questions, they've answered their questions. What's done is done. And getting worked up over which of you was right on question 9 or question 15 or whatever, 100% not worth your time and energy. Okay? So, exactly, right? All it's going to do is make you feel anxious and bad. So don't do it. Don't do it. Don't have those conversations. Don't be the person asking. And if you get asked, don't answer. Okay? So, all right. So with that in mind, right, I do not expect that we're going to have much more than this today. We might have a couple more people trickle in, and I'm not really worried about it if they do. So what I want to do is check in with you guys, make sure that you feel like you're getting a handle on the occupier's liability stuff, and then we will chat about the tutorial question. Okay, so how do you guys find the occupier's liability stuff that we've talked about?
For what I have gotten so far, it's interesting, but you have to know that you have to be very careful when you're dealing with it because there are these very slight distinctions
Mm-hmm.
that could get you in trouble as the person who owns the property.
Yeah, and one of the things that I think is useful to keep in mind, right, is that um, an awful lot of these cases really turn on how the visitor gets characterized. And so a lot of the time these questions of occupiers liability turn on this very fact driven analysis, and so it can be hard to sort of pull general principles from them. One thing that I do want to point out is because we keep getting asked in these conversations about the the signs, the disclaimers of liability in at car parks and at public facilities, one of the things that I want to point out is I can't speak for anywhere else in the Caribbean because I've not been anywhere else in the Caribbean other than Barbados. But in Barbados, the statute, the Occupiers Liability Act, actually allows occupiers to explicitly disclaim the duty of care. And so there is that mechanism of sort of, refusing liability and that being effective under the statute. It's not necessarily going to be effective in places that still use the common law structure for occupiers liability, but it is effective in Barbados and Jamaica, okay, where the statute allows that sort of thing. Okay, so with that in mind, right, do you guys have any other questions about the occupiers liability that we need to go over?
Currently, I do not have any questions. Admittedly, I am a bit behind in terms of the reading, which I know I have to do, but I was just a bit hard pressed considering that I had criminal law, so I didn't really get to do the reading. But I know that once we have questions, we're always free to ask the questions, whether by email or in the virtual hours. So I'll do my reading, and then once I get that done, then if anything pops up, then I'll definitely ask.
Great. Okay. I take it that that's a similar, that there's similar sentiments sort of all around the room.
Excuse me, sir. I have one question, and it may sound a little weird. So our exam for you is going to be in the form of multiple choice, correct?
It's going to be multiple choice and short answer.
Right.
But the short answer is basically an opportunity for you to make up questions that you miss on the multiple choice.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Anything else? No? Okay. All right. So the task for today was to write a fact pattern that would fail each step of the remoteness analysis. So you'll recall there are 3 steps to the remoteness analysis. They're drawn from Professor Dworkin's article that I posted to eLearning. And I had envisioned that the assignment would involve the creation of 3 fact patterns, right? One that failed the first step, one that failed the second step, and one that failed the third step. However, this morning in the early tutorial, I realized that the question was ambiguous because every student that was in that tutorial had written one fact pattern that failed all 3 steps. So that's fine if that's what you did. And it's also fine if you didn't get to this at all and you need to do that. So we are going to do a think, pair, share, like we did either last week or the week before. All these tutorials are running together. No, it wasn't last week. Last week was revisions. It must have been the week before. So we're going to do the think, pair, share, but we are going to actually do the thinking here. For those of you who have been busy revising for CRIM, and so you haven't had a chance to look at this week's tutorial question. So take 5 and think about this through this lens. If you can write a fact pattern for each step, that's great. If you write one fact pattern that fails all 3 steps, that's also okay. And we will reconvene in 5 minutes to go into our pairs. Okay, so I'm going to mute so that you guys can focus. Okay, guys, so let's bring it back in, and we're going to go into breakout rooms now. And once again, right, this is you discussing your, it happens every time. It happens every time. I say we're going to go into breakout rooms and somebody drops off the meeting. It's the weirdest coincidence that tech problems always seem to happen right as I say we're going into small groups. Okay, so we're going to go into breakout rooms, and again, this is, you're going to be presenting what you have to your partner, and it's going to be with 6 students, rooms of 2. Well, heck, we'll just do 2 rooms of 3. So you're going to be presenting to one another, and you should feel free to critique each other's each other's fact patterns and try and like make them better. So we'll take about 10 minutes, do that, and then we'll reconvene. And once again, once we reconvene, you will be presenting someone's work that is not yours. Okay? So with that, I'm going to generate the rooms. And that's there. And they are open, so please head on in. Okay, so we're back together. We appear to have lost the entire other breakout room, and that happens. So who would like to go first?
I can.
Sure, go ahead.
So what I have is that someone had an allergy.
So whose fact pattern is this?
I have Anaphoebe's.
Okay, so yeah. lay it on us.
Okay, so someone had an allergy, but they did not know about the allergy that they had. This allergy was to seafood. So one day they went to a restaurant and they ordered seafood. And because they were allergic to it, but they didn't know they had an allergic reaction, but that reaction was not fatal. It just resulted in the person being hospitalized.
Okay, so how does this not meet the remoteness standards? What part of the remoteness analysis does this fall short on?
Okay, so in my mind, what I am thinking is that you cannot foresee, let's say, damage, harm to somebody if you are not, in a case like this, if you are not aware of the allergy that the person had.
Well, I mean, I think that the issue with that is that then you run up against the egg skull plaintiff principle, right? Where the defendant is expected to be aware that, people can be allergic to seafood, right? But that's a thing that happens.
The victim herself did not know that she had the allergy. Mm-hmm. It was only when she ate the seafood, then she found out that she was allergic to it because, like I said, she had to be taken to the hospital. So she did not know.
Yeah, I think, I think that this presents an issue that sounds in but-for causation. It doesn't sound in remoteness, right? The issue here is that there's an intervening cause that breaks the responsibility of the defendant, right? So the defendant serving the seafood is not the cause of the injury. The cause of the injury is the plaintiff eating it despite their health problem, right? If the plaintiff had said, you know, so sometimes you see this on social media, right? People say, oh, if you order a soy milk latte at a cafe, I'm serving you, I'm going to serve you whole milk because I don't have time to clean another carafe, and you're just being trendy, right? So that's a thing that you see people say on social media sometimes, right? And if someone's actually allergic to milk, right, they're actually lactose intolerant, that's a legitimate tort, right? You have been informed, this is not what I want. You should know that people out in the world are lactose intolerant, right? That's the egg skull plaintiff rule.
Right.
And you served the wrong thing, intentionally, right? Without regard for whether there was an allergy or not. This seems to me, because of the lack of knowledge, like it doesn't even reach the question of remoteness. Does that make sense? Like we're not asking the question, is the instrument of harm a reasonably foreseeable source of danger? Excuse me. Is the instrument of harm a reasonably foreseeable source of danger? We're not asking that question because we don't ever actually get to it, right? We sort of end the analysis earlier in the process. What are some ways that we can fiddle with this fact pattern that would meet the actual question? So the first step is
maybe she had maybe she had an allergic reaction. No, maybe let's say she had an allergy to like only those sea creatures that we consider like the ones that would clean the ocean. So maybe like shrimp and those kind of stuff. So maybe that was the allergic reaction that maybe that was the allergy that she thought she had, but then she ordered fish. I don't, cause
who would liability fall on for that though? Because they don't know that.
Yeah, so I think we need to sort of zero in on what are the questions in the remoteness analysis, right? What are the things that we ask when we're trying to determine whether the harm was foreseeable? And the first thing is the instrument of harm a foreseeable source of danger, right?
Right.
And I think that, if you're dealing with food, that allergic reactions are reasonably foreseeable, but if we pitch it as a slip and fall case, right? So the waiter drops a shrimp on the way to another table, and our plaintiff, steps on it and falls and breaks their hip. Okay. That raises the question of, is this a reasonably foreseeable source of danger?
Right.
Maybe, right? Again, and Professor Dworkin, I think, makes this point that the first question is actually really hard for a plaintiff to lose on. Almost everything can be a reasonably foreseeable source of danger because obviously there was a danger. Otherwise, there wouldn't be a tort case. the one thing that I can think of is, like we were, there may be some things that, if you can pick up a jellyfish and throw it at someone, maybe we don't expect that to kill them. Who knows, right? This first question's very hard to overcome. The second question is, I think, a little easier, right? The daftness test, the manner of harm test. That raises the question of, that I think we have something that's there with this, with the slip and fall that maybe we don't with the allergy, right? Somebody eats something and it puts them in the hospital because they have an allergic reaction. Well, that's a fairly reasonable story, right? But cooked shrimp on a clean floor and somebody slips and they do a rainbow kick over their head and they land and they break their hip. Well, that's a story that you'll be telling at restaurant conventions for the next 20 years. And so I think that it's possible in that circumstance for us to say, we're not convinced of this, right? We're not convinced that this manner of harm is reasonably foreseeable. And then on the type of harm, that is a whole different can of worms, right? That presents a different issue. But again, it's a question of, finding a story that we tell that leads to a category of damage that is not within the reasonably foreseeable. So for example, right, slipping and falling on a piece of shrimp, we would expect that to be harm to the person. But if you slip and fall on a piece of shrimp and that carries you over a guardrail into a car park that's a floor below, and you land on someone else's car, and now the car owner is suing the restaurant owner. Well, maybe that type of harm isn't foreseeable for this circumstance. So do we see now sort of how, what the assignment is asking for, what we're being called upon to do here?
Yes, sir.
How about you ladies? How about you guys? Do you feel like you have a better grip now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, sir. But I think these scenarios are just too crazy.
Part of the point of this is that this is an assignment about, like, how crazy can we get? How weird do we have to be before this analysis, before a plaintiff's on the remoteness question? I think this is an exercise in boundary drawing. And I think that you guys sort of have a grip now on sort of what the types of boundaries would look like, right? So we have a few minutes left. Would someone else like to offer up a fact pattern, or we can call it a day if you guys sort of are tired and would like to go someplace and go in a quiet dark room and put a cloth over your eyes for a while.
Okay, I'll read Keandre's own.
Okay.
Two men or boys were playing with swords. And the swords were supposedly fake, but one of the boys cut the other boy fatally with the sword because it actually was not fake. It was not plastic. it was iron, but it had this kind of film over it, I guess, that makes it look not real.
Mm-hmm.
And so he should have known that it was real because it was developing rust on the edge of it. And I guess the weight would tell you, okay, this is not fake. Keandre, I don't know if I said it good enough, but yeah.
So my question would be, how does this fail the remoteness analysis? Because it sure sounds like it meets it to me.
What was supposed to happen?
I don't know.
What was supposed to happen is that I was playing with two scenarios. The one that she gave you, it meets the test, but what the other one was that he thought that it was plastic. There were no signs that it was not plastic, and both of them were playing with the supposedly toy sword. It was only when he went to defend himself and he struck the other his mate, he noticed that it was in factually, not a toy sword. So I was thinking in his mind, it's not a foreseeable, something that would cause danger, because in my, if it's plastic, I don't expect a plastic to rip your guts out.
Right. Okay, so this I think this is onto something on the first question, right? The idea is that, a plastic toy is designed to not harm someone, right? Because it's designed to be used by kids whom, as we talked about yesterday, right, don't have the same appreciation for their own danger as other people. So I think that's a really helpful piece of the puzzle. Do we think that we fail on the manner of harm test? Like, is this a story that makes some sort of sense?
I guess. Because in my thinking, right, sometimes you have a knife, and because of how thin the knife is, right, it could feel like the knife is not real until you actually have to cut something.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't, that was the kind that was the line that I was thinking, and he's thinking that it's plastic. It looks like plastic, so to me,
I don't disagree with you. I think that, I think that this comes back to the first question, right? But I think the second question is, if we assume that, that this is in fact a source of harm, is this the manner of harm that we would expect? Well, yeah, we expect a sword to cut people.
Correct.
Right. So I think that I'm not sure that we have failed the second step, because remember, the assignment is to fail each step of the remoteness analysis. Again,
so if he thought, because remember he thought that it was a plastic sword. Well, both of them thought that it was a plastic sword. Mm-hmm. So in my mind, I'm thinking I'm using a plastic sword, so I wouldn't see me ripping out somebody's guts with a plastic sword. So that's why I was thinking that it would not, it would not be the type of danger to be foreseeable, because it's plastic.
So what is the type of danger that's foreseeable?
With a plastic sword?
Again, we're assuming that it's a reasonable source of danger, right? We're assuming that we've passed the first question, so we've moved on to the second. What is a reasonably foreseeable manner of harm that a plastic sword can perform?
None.
I think I said the same thing.
I mean, maybe, right? Maybe.
Maybe a little bruise, depends on how
A little pain.
Yeah.
But blunt force trauma, right?
Yes.
Right.
You know, you smack somebody with it, and that can introduce that can be harm. Yeah. Okay. So here's the thing. I think that I think that you've presented an argument for why this would fail the second step of the test. I do not find it especially persuasive. However, I think it's a valid argument that you would be able to present to a judge and not, in good faith and not be sanctioned over. Whether the judge is going to buy it is going to depend on how the judge characterizes the instrument of harm, right? If he says, okay, what's the harm that swords do? Okay, then maybe your analysis doesn't make sense. But if he characterizes it as, okay, what is a reasonably foreseeable harm from a plastic sword toy, then that's a different analysis, and I think maybe your argument carries the day. So it sort of depends on how the instrument of harm is characterized. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. It does.
Okay. So the third step, right? This is the type of harm, and to be perfectly frank, I think I don't think this story fails this test. Okay, right? The reasonably foreseeable type of harm is absolutely harm to the person, and you've absolutely performed harm to the person, right? You've killed your putative victim. And so it seems to me that is like, that's the piece of the puzzle where we're not there yet. So you would need, one thing that you might do is, the death of the child, renders their parent catatonic, and they're unable to fulfill their responsibilities at work, and so they lose their job, and now the parent is suing for the loss of their job, and now we're in an economic loss situation rather than a harm to the person. So does that make sense, sort of the distinction that we're drawing here?
Yes, it does.
Good.
It does.
Good. How about you ladies? How do you feel?
Yes, it makes sense.
Okay. Good. Okay, great. Well, we are out of time. So I appreciate you guys coming in and doing this. And I appreciate your engagement and enthusiasm. And I certainly appreciate you guys coming in and doing this immediately after your midterm. So I will let you guys go, and we will see you tomorrow. So take care and bye.
Thank you. Bye.